Hey there, so I'm going to do something a little unusual for me. I'm going to do sort of I guess you'd call it sort of a book study group, book review, something, I don't know. But I got this book, Secrets of the JavaScript Ninja, by John Resig and Bear, and I won't even attempt to say his last name, but the authors of this book. So John Resig, I know, did jQuery and QUnit. And I've been waiting for this book for a while. I'm hoping it'll be everything I was hoping for. It's hopefully a really important book, just like Crockford's JavaScript The Good Parts was for me a few years ago. That said, there was a couple of interesting things that I thought I'd sort of turn into code katas for myself, little practice exercises and whatnot. So they showed you how to create your own custom assertion. And so that was sort of a part one. I'm going to try to do all this in one video. But they did that, and I'm going to code that up. And then they did some interesting stuff with basically doing an experiment to prove how JavaScript scoping works. And I'm not going to get into the actual rules. You can find that everywhere on the net. But we're going to look at how they prove this. And I think it should be pretty self-evident once we do. So let me get right into coding here. So I've got a little template. We'll just call this JS scope. I don't know why I used all capitals there, but so let's create the assertion first. So we'll do a script tag, and we're just going to define that. I'm going to go a little silent here. So we're going to start with a condition, and then a description. And this will get called, if you've done any TDD, this is just going to be an assertion. But we're going to actually put this in the results of this into the DOM. So we're going to create a list element, document create element, and then we're going to give this element a class name based on whether this condition is truthy or falsy. Okay, and then we're going to append the description that we passed in here as a second argument. And to do that, we have to convert that to a text node, create text node with the description. And then we're going to, let's see, well then we're going to, well hold on a second, we're going to actually create a placeholder for where all this stuff will go. We'll call this results. And this is, again, all credit to them on this. I'm just basically doing a derivative because this is a sort of a study group type of thing. I didn't come up with this stuff. So what are we going to do? We're going to get that element by ID, the results element. Okay. And then once we've got it, we're going to append the li to it. And there we go, 4 lines, and we have a little custom poor man's assertion. So if we actually come in here and test this out, and we do on load, we're going to use this thing, and we're just going to force a pass and a failure. Forced test pass, and we'll force a failure too. Okay, so now we should be able to refresh this page that I have pointing to it, and there we have our 2 LIs, but we don't have any indication between the passing and failure, so we'll just put in some quick styling here. And generally we want to have our styles in a style sheet, a separate style sheet file, but this is fine for just quickly prototyping things and seeing how they're working or not working. So we'll add green and red for pass and fail. So now if we go back over here and refresh, yay, we've got some sort of poor man's assertions going. So that was the first part that I want to go over. The next part that I thought was really interesting was how they use this tool in chapter 3 to basically assert or prove how JavaScript scoping works. So see if I can remember how they did this. They had an outer function, and then in there they had a var a that they declared, and then an inner function that I believe it did nothing, and then var b equals 2, and then an if statement. If a equals 1, that's always going to be true. Create another var, or c equals 3. And let's see. Okay, so that set up the function, and they wanted to basically see when these different variables were in scope. So what they did was they created sort of a group of assertions, and then they copied them in different places. But before they did that, they actually created some placeholders. And let's do that first. So they forced a test pass and then put in a placeholder for before the outer. This is going to take a second to set up. We'll see why it's interesting once we get it in there. And then we did another one inside outer, but before we declare a. So inside outer before a. And then there was another one that was inside outer after a. And then we had one inside outer after inner. Okay. Yep. After inner and b, right? So we'll put this down here. And then there was another one inside the conditional. So this was inside outer inside if. Inside if. And then I did one after the if. And then they did one after the actual outer function. This will make more sense if we actually show the function call here. So this is going to be outside outer. Okay, so these are just the placeholders. And then they created a series of assertions for scoping and copied them and pasted them just after all these placeholders. Before we do that, let's just take a quick look. We've got an outer function. We've got a simple variable declaration, an inner function, another simple variable declaration, and we have an if conditional block. And that's sort of the structure of this set of variables we're going to be asserting on. So let's get through these quick, and then we'll be able to copy and paste them. A bunch of type of tests saying that the type of outer equals function. And basically if that is true, then it's in scope. So then we just say outer is in scope. Okay, and then we're going to do that for inner, which at this point shouldn't be in scope, right? Because we're creating function scope in JavaScript, so we haven't gotten into outer, so how could inner be visible, right? So let's do the numeric variables here, and then we'll say a is in scope, and then we can copy these twice and just place a with b and c with c, or a with c. Okay, so now we can copy these guys right after our sort of marker assertions, and we're just going to see what the scope is at each point. And we can't create a helper, because if you understand how JavaScript scoping works, the function itself is going to create another scope. So we want to really know at each point what each of these scopes are. So we're very close to having this so we can actually run it. A lot of setup. I just thought this was a really great way of sort of proving yourself that you understand how the scoping works. Okay, so we set that up. Let's come over here and run this. Okay, so real quickly, before outer, outer is in scope, of course, and nothing within it is in scope. Inside outer, before we've declared and assigned to A, outer is in scope, inner is in scope because we have forward references to declared functions. A, B, and C are not. However, after we've assigned to A, it gets into scope. Inside outer, after inner and B, A and B are also in scope, C is not. And when we get inside the if condition, everything is now in scope. And as you recall, we place this guy right after the assignment to C, so that makes sense. Now once we get past the if condition, notice that C is still in scope. So that shows that there is no block scope in JavaScript because C would be hidden if you were in Java or something like that. But it's in scope because we really only have function scope, function level scoping in JavaScript. And then once we get outside of outer, the only thing that's in scope at that point then is outer. So really no surprises if you're sort of an old hand at JavaScript. But I thought that the approach and technique for checking this stuff out was really neat, kind of scientific. And sometimes you read these books and you kind of want to more get inside the mind of how somebody like John Resig, well, for all I know, maybe it was Bear that did this chapter. I don't know, but in any event, it's interesting to see how they approach this. And great little test. So that's sort of my book study review slash code kata, if you will. That's about all I have to say about that. Hopefully it wasn't too off topic and you found it interesting. Oh, and get the book. It's a good book.